Hello, everyone. Welcome to my vlog, and I'm Agnil de Cruz. Today, we have a very old friend of mine. I've known Shashank for about 25 years now, and Shashank is currently a software engineer with Amazon, and he's got an undergrad degree in computer science from Manipal and a master's degree in computer science again from Columbia University. So, uh, without further ado, I think let's start speaking to Shashank. So, firstly, Shashank, welcome and thank you for taking the time to speak to all of us. But I want to start off with a very basic question, Shashank. And I think you're a software engineer, so of course, I guess we all know that, and it's a very common term. But what do you do? Like, what does a software engineer do, Shashank?
That's a good question. So, at the crux of it, a software engineer's job is to write code and produce software or build applications which is used by ordinary people like you and me, right? And an application can be used for, say, a conversation like this. It's also a piece of software, or more specific niche software like running heavy machinery like in an oil rig. Software spans everything. And from that aspect of it, I fundamentally write code. But writing code is just not enough. As a software engineer, you do a lot more. You need to understand what is the requirements from a business point of view. So you probably work with, say, a product manager or some kind of leadership where they tell you, hey, this is what we want to fundamentally achieve. And then based on where you are in terms of your seniority and experience, you are responsible for building a small piece of this solution or architecting the whole piece of it.
Interesting.
A good example would be saying that you want to build a house, and you first, so you speak to the customer and go like, what is it that you want in your house? You understand the requirements. From there, you go work with an architect to design what the house looks like. A software engineer does that as well. And then you have people who come in and build the foundation, lay the bricks, whatnot. That, in terms of software engineering, is writing code. So you have the requirements gathering, you have basically the design or understanding how the system is supposed to look, and then actually implementing it or laying the bricks in this case. So that is what, and then and the last piece of it is just testing to make sure what was required and what actually has come out is the same.
That's very
So if there was an expectation of a castle and you build a hut, that's not really meeting expectation, and that is the testing part of it. But the whole thing encompasses software engineering.
interesting. So you seem so passionate about this, Shashank. So I guess was this always a calling, or did you have like a eureka moment when you decided, okay, that's exactly what I want to do?
I don't think it was a eureka moment. It was more like a passion which continued to grow. And at some point, I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. As you have known me from a long time, as a kid, I used to love gaming. I love computer games. And I was very fascinated by these people who basically built something that gave me so much of joy. I was like, if these guys can give me so much of joy, I want to give the same joy to other people. And that's what made me decide that I want to be a software engineer. And I was all right at coding as well. So I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. And this is what I think I'm good at. So I was like, why not? So that is what made me go into software engineering. I wanted to go in to be a gamer, but as time progressed, and I realized that I wanted to be in software engineering, but gaming was just one aspect of it. And I really could create a bigger impact in other ways. And hence, I became a software engineer to design applications and build applications.
That's very interesting, Shank. Thank you. I think that's very insightful, actually. And I guess what are the qualities a good software engineer must have, Shashank? What makes someone successful in the software engineering space?
Sure. So in the software engineering space, what are the good qualities, right? Let's go back to the same metaphor of building a house,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, the most important, like I think there are four pieces to it. There's the requirements, there is the actual design, engineering, the actual construction, and then the testing of it. And you need to fundamentally make sure you're good at all four pieces. And what does that mean? So you need to first of all understand what the customer needs, have a level of empathy towards the customer, understand, try getting into the customer's head. So that is one piece of it. So that helps you with the requirements. The second piece is having this grand vision after understanding this. So it doesn't mean that you have to be like an absolute genius or whatever. Once you understand what the customer needs, converting that into what is achievable, I think is a skill set which is required. In again, this would be something like having the ability to take these requirements and convert it into a specification and build like a mental model. And
Interesting.
that is what creates a good design. So understanding that is important. And then after that, making sure that you're given these two constraints. One is the requirements and how the system is supposed to look. Being able to write maintainable code is the last piece. So if all three are done, testing becomes just more of a checkpoint rather than anything else. So given these things, what is the skill set you need? I would say understanding what the customer needs, having a strong customer focus, trying to keep it simple, and understanding what is achievable, and then implementing it based on these constraints.
Interesting, interesting. So let's talk quickly about career paths for a software engineer, Shashank. And
Yeah.
so, how does one progress, or how does career progression look like for a software engineer? For example, does one continue as a software engineer, senior software engineer? Like, is there some kind of a fellow or something like that, or is there people management, is that an option? Product management, or startup founders, or like, can you talk about the little different options in terms of progression for a software engineer, please, Shashank?
Sure. So there are multiple paths somebody can take. You obviously start at the bottom, and I think
Mm-hmm.
every software engineer first starts up by working on small pieces and
Yeah.
designing and writing code and like delivering pieces. But as you're trying to go up the ladder, you want to start identifying what areas that excite you with software engineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously there is two large parts. There is the management part of it, and then there's the individual contributor part of it. The management part is just at some level having people under you and helping people who report into you to deliver stuff. So you don't actually deliver stuff, but you are an enabler. Or there's the individual career path where you either become just to the pure engineering excellence, I would like to call it, which is software engineer, software engineer, staff engineer, principal, and whatnot. Everybody at some level then call the highest levels as a different name. Some call it fellow, some call it distinguished engineer, some call it principal, whatnot. Uh, so that is the piece. Then you could potentially say that, hey, I actually like the strategy and the requirements piece of it a lot. And then you go into the product management part of it. So you're like, I want to focus on understanding what are the customer requirements, getting the next level of requirements, as well as once the product is built, I want to basically help it launch it in the market or the go-to-market
Interesting.
strategy
Interesting.
and make it a success. And then
Interesting.
the other people who are like, hey, I like all this, but what I'm really good at and what I get excited about is making sure I take these complex projects and make sure they work in lockstep, almost like a conductor in an orchestra. And that is where you have become a project manager, right? And again, over there also you have just project managers or product managers, and moving into senior project managers, senior product managers, and so on and so forth. So you can have multiple career paths, but you start off with the same base level of competencies, and then you start honing your skills and sharpening specific areas so that you are able to focus on what excites you the most.
Very interesting. Okay, okay. So, just digging a little deeper into that, Shashank, are there specific personality types or are there specific traits within people, or are there specific types of people even who you think should pick a particular field, or how would I know what is good for me? And is there any advice to budding software engineers or people who are already software engineers from your side as to what should they see in themselves that gives them a specific path? Do you have a preference there or some advice there?
That's a good question, right? So the way I would look at it, I would answer your question. I would answer this part of your question, which is, what should one look at to get to their final state? So everybody's start state is the same. It's now understanding what journey they need to go on. The best way I would identify that, and this is something which I had to go through also myself, is figuring out what your what excites you as well as what are you good at. You need to find the right balance, because you could potentially get excited by something, but if you don't feel like you're able to achieve that, it's pointless. At the same time, uh, if you're good at something but you don't get excited, that's another issue you've got. And at the same time, it's you need to look at what companies can give you that particular platform, right? So this is very abstract, and let me go into specifics. So once you become a software engineer and you start moving up the ladder, you start taking a call saying, what do I do next? And the best way is to just try it out and just like step in somebody's shoe. So, and usually most companies give you that ability of trying out different things, saying, hey, I'm able to run my projects on my own as an engineer. Can I go ahead and go into project management, because I feel like I get excited by this. At the same time, I feel like I have a good control over how I run my projects. Or there's a second piece, which is like, hey, I really like coding, but at the same time, I get very, very excited by the fact of understanding these customer requirements. I want to be close to the customer. Or once a product is completed, how do you make sure that the customer gets what they need? So it's like, then you can go like, hey, can I try product management? Or you could be a person who goes like, hey, all I want to do is, given a problem and a specific set of requirements, I want to solve these. So the specific requirements do not have to be very detailed. It could be still a vague, ambiguous requirement, but a requirement which is still concrete at a very, very high level.
Interesting.
And then you would say, okay, I want to be an engineer, and I can and go the whole principal distinguished engineer path. Or you could be somebody else who can go like, hey, I like a bit of everything, but at the same time, I get very excited and I can empower people to deliver stuff. Right? I can step back and feel like I'm not in control, but at the same time empower others to deliver. And then you go like, okay, that's probably a management question. Then you want to go into management, because then you're basically an enabler and not a maker. And both of
Okay.
them have their own places. It's not saying like an enabler is better than a maker or a maker is better than an enabler. It's just different perspective, and you need to try it out. And once you're able to try that out, that's when, and if you feel like you're a good fit, then you start pursuing that path, understanding what does it take, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the things that are your strengths, what are the things that you need to improve on, and then you start working towards it and go towards that path.
That's very, very interesting. So I guess it's an exercise. If you want to be successful, I mean, what I'm hearing is it's an exercise of uh, understanding yourself. Realizing what drives you, what motivates you, what are you good
Exactly.
at, and knowing yourself very well to be successful in this. Okay, that's very interesting, Shashank, and great advice. I think that's thank you. So, uh, we're recording this, Shashank, in August of 2020, which has been uh, a year that, like nothing else. I don't think in our lifetimes, I don't think in almost anyone alive, I don't think in anyone's lifetimes we've seen something like this. So, From your perspective, how has software engineering changed, Shashank? And can you talk to us a little bit about not just the short term, but also the long term? What have you seen change? What kind of changes are you seeing? Where do you see the industry moving to?
That's a really good question, right? And I think people are still trying to figure that out. So the short term, it's very easy to understand where we are at. Uh, in the short term, I would say that obviously everybody working from home, it's very different from in person. So some of the biggest challenges have been how do you build those interpersonal relationships, right? Especially when you're working for larger organizations where having this ability to talk to people and build communication channels and build trust with others. Because when you're with a larger organization, or as an organization starts growing, the number of people who have to be in sync with you and on the same frequency is a lot more challenging. Okay, and it just gets exponentially tougher. And at least when you're in person, because humans fundamentally are very social beings, it's easier to do it on a face-to-face conversation than doing it over a video conference where trying to read, what do you say, non-verbal cues is so much more harder. At the same time, trying to get information that you need quickly is a lot more challenging because you can say, hey, somebody, you can just ping them, but like because everybody's working from home and schedules are all over the place, somebody pings me now and I might just be in the kitchen trying to like heat up something or making a cup of tea or coffee or something like that. So while if I was in the office, I would just look over my shoulder and say, hey, is this person there at their desk? If they are, I'll just walk over and say, hey, this is what I want. And then from a 1 minute discussion can be a more complex, longer discussion. So that is a short-term thing. Long-term, there's a lot of different views around it. Certain companies are of the view that in person, being in the office should not matter. As humans, we're adapting. And this is another instance where humans are trying to adapt, and potentially we're going to start figuring out ways where all of us can work as effectively as in the office, but remotely. That is one school of thought. The other school of thought is, hey, this is just a temporary blip, and long-term face-to-face physical contact is more important, where you can at least like see each other and like talk face-to-face. And they're like, let's not worry about it and just move forward. So there are different schools of thought. At some level, I feel like both things are extremes, and there'll be some kind of weird middle ground where I think we can start seeing a lot more people working from home more often, companies being more open to it, as well as better tooling to make people more effective. But at the same time, not going to the office seems very, very strange, and I'm not sure that it will be something that will happen for good. So at least that's how I see it. But this is an unexplored space. We don't know, and time will tell.
Interesting. Yeah, and I really love your point on. I think as humans, we are evolving. We will evolve, and I'm sure we then at some point we'll figure out the right way to work, even in spite of this and work around this. So
Exactly.
absolutely, yeah, I completely agree with that, Shashank. So Shashank, my last question for you is. So I have a niece. I think you've met her. She's about 10 years old, and she looks at all the cool gadgets that we use, and looks at a Google Pixel, looks at an iPhone, and looks at a Google Home, or an Alexa or something like that. And she says, "Who makes all these things?" And I say, "Software engineers generally make them." So she's like, "Oh, I want to be a software engineer." So what would your advice to that 10-year-old there be in terms of what should she do to become a software engineer, Shashank?
That's a good question, right? I'm going to answer a slightly different question to what you have asked, but that will lead you to but I'm hoping that will lead to the answer which you're looking for. So when we were 10 or 12, when we used to be gaming a lot, right?
Yes.
I thought gaming was the stuff. That's what got me joy. right? Quoting Marie Kondo, sparks joy. Uh, for your niece, looking at an iPhone or Google gadget, okay, is sparking the joy. And over time, things change. So, what is happening today, what is exciting today, might not be the most exciting thing 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. There's this great NHL player called Wayne Gretzky,
Mm-hmm.
and he had this very, very famous line, which is quoted by a lot of leaders and by a lot of management consultants. But I just love it. It's got it where Wayne Gretzky says that he does not skate to where the puck is at. He's skating to where the puck is going to be. That is one piece of it. So you need to, if you're trying to identify where to build a career, you want to build a career to where the industry is going or where humanity is going. Okay. At the same time, you want to be at a place which excites you. So in my case, writing software excited me. Was it for gaming? Was it something else? That is where the puck was taking me. At the same time, uh, what today's needs are from like 15, 20 years ago are very different. So I would basically look at two specific people and their famous lines. One is do what sparks joy in you and go and follow where the puck is going.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very very interesting. So I hope so. All of you, I think, who are uh, aspiring software engineers, or I think in this case, aspiring to be anything. I think this is great advice, Shashank. So thank you for that. I have a lot of other questions to ask you, but I'll keep that for another day. I just want to thank you for your time. I think this was a very insightful conversation, and I've personally learned a lot in these few minutes that you've spoken, and I hope people who are watching also, have learned something about software engineering. So thanks a lot, Shashank.
Thanks a lot. I can let the pleasure was all mine.